And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us across Louisiana Plain on our platform where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism, advancing the cause of constitutional conservatives, and slowly but surely, day by day, draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is The State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Well, hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We're so grateful for you. You are the best listening family anyone could possibly hope or ask for. And we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you're looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd also really appreciate it if you would help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. To do that, please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can even share short clips rather than full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. Well, today, we want to get an understanding of what the week ahead holds with the governor's inauguration, the swearing in of the new legislature, and the House and Senate organizing session. And we are thrilled to have Senator Jay Morris joining us to tell us what we can expect in the week ahead. Before we talk to Senator Morris, let me read the scripture of the day. It's from Psalm chapter 78, and it says, "The story of Israel is a lesson in God's ways. He established decrees for Jacob and established the law in Israel, and he commanded our forefathers to teach them to their children. For perpetuity, God's ways will be passed down from one generation to the next, even to those not yet born. In this way, every generation will set its hope in God and not forget his wonderful works, but keep his commandments. By following his ways, they will break the past bondage of their fickle fathers who were a stubborn, rebellious generation and whose spirits strayed from the eternal God. They refused to love him with all their hearts. Take, for example, the sons of Ephraim. Though they were all equipped warriors, each with weapons, when the battle began, they retreated and ran away in fear. They didn't really believe the promises of God. They refused to trust him and move forward in faith. They forgot his wonderful works and the miracles of the past, even their exodus from Egypt, the epic miracle of his might. They forgot the glories of his power at the place of passing over." And the passage goes on later in the chapter to explain that the tribe of Ephraim was rejected by God when he chose where his glory would dwell. Instead of choosing to dwell with Ephraim, he chose to dwell in the place of the worshiping tribe of Judah. And from that tribe, he chose David to be king and to be the one from whose lineage Jesus came to bring us salvation. And so what this scripture was really speaking to me this morning was that fear is not just a feeling, it is a choice. And living in fear instead of faith is rebellion against the Lord, and it has consequences for the future generations. So determined to live in faith, this is a time where we as warriors who the Lord has equipped must not retreat. We must move forward in faith.
And the only way, Danielle, that we can move forward and accomplish good things for the citizens of Louisiana is through faith, because there will always be obstacles, there will always be opposition, and that's why we have to set our face like flint and move forward always in faith, faith over fear. And speaking of someone who has done that during a long tenure, not only in the State House, but now in the Senate, is our guest today, Senator Jay Morris, who, among many other great things that he's done, carried the transgender bill on the Senate side during the 2023 session, which was so very important in order to protect our minors. Senator Morris, thank you for joining us today, sir. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Chris, Danielle. I appreciate the opportunity to join y'all today.
It's our pleasure.
We are so happy to have you. What are your thoughts, Senator Morris? We have the inauguration coming up, new administration, the swearing in, and an upcoming organizing session in our state legislature. What are your thoughts on the organizing session? What do you see happening there?
Well, a lot of what is going to happen there is already foreordained. The leadership of the House and Senate in terms of president and speaker has already been decided. So most of what's going to go on during the organizational session will be formalities of what we know is going to happen. The most important things, in my view, are going to be what happens in the couple of weeks after the organizing session. And that's when we find out how the committees are going to be structured, who our committee chairs will be and vice chairs, and where everybody lands. You know, the governor elect, Landry, has not been sworn in yet. We're getting an idea of where he's probably heading. Obviously, we have a couple of special sessions that are tentatively scheduled, but we don't know the details yet of where this governor wants to lead. And I suspect we will all, all of us conservatives will be highly aligned with Governor Landry going forward, but all the details are something that we're all kind of waiting around to see. So there'll be a lot of pomp and circumstance, you know, over the organizational session, the inauguration of the new governor, and all of us get sworn into our legislative seats. Of course, I've been in the legislature, as you guys know, for 12 years now, but I got to get sworn in again, and we have to elect our Senate president officially. The House will elect their House Speaker officially, and then he has to get to work. I mean, the president, the new president, the new speaker have yet to be installed, so they don't have any authority yet. They're learning a bit how things work, but they're not in their offices. They can't direct staff and demand much of anything. They can just ask a few questions. So they have a learning curve they have to work on, and then the committee assignments. So there's a lot going to be going on, and on top of all that, that the leadership will have to deal with will be, of course, the two special sessions that are tentatively scheduled for January and one in February into early March. So a lot to look forward to, and I'm very hopeful that we can accomplish some things that we have not been able to accomplish in the last 8 years.
Jay, the organizing session is the session, if I understand you correctly, where the committee chairmanships of these important House and Senate committees will be determined?
No, that's determined later.
Okay, so that'll be determined later.
Right. The only thing that really will happen during the legislative organizational session is, number one, we all get sworn in. Number two, at least on the Senate side, then number two, we elect a Senate president who is going to be Cameron Henry. The third thing is we'll elect a secretary who will be Yolanda Dixon, has been with the Senate for many years. And then we will elect a sergeant at arms. And we're not sure exactly who the sergeant at arms is going to be yet. But in any event, those are the primary things. And that, you know, there's some luncheons and social things, and a lot of the new members will be coming in. I've met most of the new members of the Senate, but not all of them. And of course, there are a lot of new House members that I haven't met yet. And so it'll be kind of everybody's first glance at each other.
First day of school kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
You mentioned the committee assignments coming up in the weeks ahead. Do you have any expectations for yourself in terms of committee assignments or chairmanships?
I don't. You know, I've had discussions with Cameron about that, and he's holding his cards close to his vest for good reason. He's not elected yet, but Cameron and I have worked together for 12 years, 8 in the House and 4 in the Senate, and we have a very good working relationship. I'll, of course, serve wherever I'm asked to, but where that exactly that's going to be, I don't know. I've got experience on a wide variety of committees. I've been on Ways and Means, Revenue and Fiscal Affairs, Commerce, both House and Senate. I've been on Health and Welfare. I was on House and Governmental Affairs. You know, so I've been on Labor. I've been on a lot of committees, so I have a general working knowledge of how things operate, and hopefully I can put that to good use.
An incoming or presumed, I guess, president is Senate President Henry. You said you worked with him previously. What can we expect from him in terms of leadership style, in terms of what you think he'll be putting forward for the Senate?
Well, Cameron is very knowledgeable about the ways of the legislature. He was a legislative aide before he got elected. He was in the House for 12 years and the Senate for 4 years, so he's got more experience than me. And he understands one of his attributes, positive attributes, is he understands other people's districts, even though he's in Jefferson Parish and he has a very small geographic district. He has a great understanding of all the districts around the state, including a lot of the rural districts and what's important for them. So I feel like he'll be a really good Senate president. He does not like a lot of fluff. He's all about getting the business done and not wasting time. And I like that about him.
Me
and
too. That is something that we definitely need.
Yes.
I mean, now he's not going to be able to if somebody wants to go a little too long at the well or that kind of thing. He's not going to be in a position to just stop that. But as far as scheduling committees and making sure they get their work done, I think he'll be very good. And we don't typically drone on as long in the Senate as you do in the House. It's a different dynamic. I've been in both places, and we tend to, if we're going to debate a bill, we tend to debate the important points and then move on and vote and move on rather than, everybody, all 39 members having to chime in. In the House, the minute a couple of people chime in, the board lights up, and the next thing you know, there have been 20 people that have spoken on a bill. So it's just a different dynamic, and
Yeah.
they each have their place.
Yeah.
Well, and you talk about the Senate being more efficient. Do you think we have seen the end of what we've heard so much about, where the Senate has been the place where good legislation goes to die? Do you think this new cohort will bring something different to the table?
I think so. Look, good legislation dies in the House too, and the Senate is known for when something's a little too, out on the edge, beyond the pale, or maybe not fully thought through, to be the dad in the room to say, "Wait a minute, let's think this through," that kind of thing. But I don't think you'll see bills held up just because they have a conservative bent, you know, as they have sometimes in the past.
Yeah, because we have seen that, Jay, where good legislation gets over there from the House, and there really is nothing substantively wrong with the legislation, important legislation, and then for one reason or another, it doesn't get through the Senate. And, so we have had several reps who've said that, unfortunately, legislation has died over in the Senate that shouldn't have. Well, hopefully, with some of the new folks in there now, that won't happen, and we'll be able to get more good legislation to the governor's desk. Certainly, with the new governor that we have now, hopefully we won't have to worry about the pen as much, right?
I wouldn't think it. We'll just have to see. That's another thing we're all waiting to see what Governor Landry's style is going to be like, and how he's going to approach things. And those are all things we don't know yet fully. I'm very encouraged, and I've known Jeff for a long time. I met him at a dinner party when I think it was at a birthday party for a friend here in Monroe, and he's got some friends up here. And delightful dinner partner. He and his wife Sharon both, and exactly how he's going to address all the things that come his way. We just don't know yet how
Yeah.
he's going to.
Well, nobody,
But
nobody
very
has a crystal ball, that's for sure. But I would suspect that the bent would be decidedly different than we've seen for the last couple of terms.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. About the special sessions that you mentioned, alluded to a minute ago, Jay, one on redistricting and one on crime. Talk about those special sessions and what your outlook is on those, and what would you expect to come out of that?
Well, First of all, the redistricting thing has been foisted upon us by the courts, and the Fifth Circuit, which is the intermediate court. I mean, for those of your listeners who don't understand, the federal court system goes from Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi are a part of the federal Fifth Circuit. So in any district court decision, and right now Judge Shelley Dick is the one that has these redistricting cases, and any appeal therefrom goes to the Fifth Circuit. If you don't like what happens at the Fifth Circuit, you can always ask the Supreme Court of the United States to review that case, but they take on less than 1% of the cases that they are asked to rule on. So you can't just count on the Supreme Court on reversing the Fifth Circuit or any of the other federal circuits if you don't like it. So the Fifth Circuit has sent a pretty clear message that our existing congressional map is not adequate under the Voting Rights Act and maybe the Constitution. And so we're going to go back to the drawing board and try to provide one that will pass muster with the court system and yet provide us adequate representation throughout the state. So, and the governor is for that. I mean, it's his idea to do it. We could let it grind through the court system a little longer, but considering the message that the Fifth Circuit has sent in its various opinions that it's handed down, I feel like the governor's making the right move. If we don't, then there's a good chance the courts will rewrite the districts and write a map that we don't like, but we'll be stuck with it, this fall.
Yeah.
So
So it's very important that we get something done on the redistricting rather than leave it in the hands of the courts, because, as you said, there's a very good likelihood that could be far less favorable than what we come up with in the legislature, and hopefully it will pass constitutional muster. What about the crime, Jay? That is a massively important issue in the state of Louisiana. We had a guest on the show recently, Lieutenant Nungesser, who expressed concern, for instance, just one example, about whether or not New Orleans right now is safe enough to host major events, to host the Super Bowl. And that's certainly not the only place that has a crime problem. What do you expect to come out of a special session to address the crime issue in Louisiana?
Well, the governor-elect already has a bunch of people working on things, and we don't know exactly what they want to do until we are all sworn in and the governor's in office and he has his staff assembled. We don't know exactly what tack he's going to take, but my understanding is there maybe is anywhere between 20 and 40 bills that are likely to be introduced. I've been very passionate about crime. I have real issues with the way a lot of things have gone down with respect to crime. It's a big, complicated, and we could spend 2 hours talking about it. But one of the things that we have to deal with in crime is a lot of our laws are already fairly tough, but we have to get all the stakeholders to do an adequate job. And that includes our judges and our DAs. And in the case of New Orleans, mayors, in terms of who they hire as their police chiefs, because you can have the toughest anti crime laws in the world, but if they aren't enforced properly, then you have a real issue. And that's very difficult to address. I know the idea has been floated to give the governor, perhaps with legislative or even Senate approval, of the ability to basically fire a DA if they're not doing their job. As the state of Florida has, I think it's been widely publicized that Governor DeSantis over there was able to get rid of a rogue prosecutor that was not prosecuting cases.
Sure did.
I brought a bill to do exactly that. Well, actually, I brought a bill to allow the attorney general to step in when a DA's office was dysfunctional, and I got obviously heavy pushback from a lot of DAs, and ended up not even bringing that to committee. I knew it was not going to pass. And even if it had, Governor Edwards would have vetoed it. And, I don't mind bringing a bill every now and then that I know that a governor might veto if I think it's the right thing, but you got to pick your battles. You just can't pass every bill that you know is not going to make it through the process. And so that was one I let rest. But hopefully something like that where, and I hate it that we feel like we have to reach inside of local government to rectify things that are going wrong. But sometimes that needs to be done. And they have the authority to do something like that in Florida. And I'm hopeful we get something similar, if not the ability to fire DAs, at least the ability to prosecute cases when a DA's office is not able to do the job, or simply won't do the job. And I think Jason Williams in New Orleans has seen the writing on the walls, so he has already entered that agreement with Attorney General Landry on allowing the AG's office to prosecute cases in which the state police are involved in arresting and investigating the cases. So that's a positive first step.
Yes, you mentioned, Jay, we had Attorney General-elect Muriel on the show recently, and we talked in some detail about that agreement that she has with Jason Williams, which would sort of automatically allow a certain category of cases or certain class of crimes to be delegated to the Attorney General's office without having to do it on a case-by-case basis, which will certainly streamline and expedite. So it's very good to see, at least in Orleans Parish, that type of collaboration between the DA and the Attorney General, and it would be nice to see that even more broadly in the state.
It's a sad state of affairs that we have so many DAs around the country that have been elected by what I would call the pro-criminal lobby. And it's not just George Soros, although his groups have
It's a big part of it.
donated money. It's a whole host of left-leaning groups that have supported financially candidates who are basically running on a soft on crime platform, and that has resulted in disasters all across America, and of course, obviously, right here in our own state. So I am very hopeful and gratified that Governor-elect Landry is ready to tackle this, because it is a real problem. All the other things that people talk about, economic development and out-migration of people that are talented from this state, things of that nature, we can't address those things and attracting business and the like, and making a better life for our citizens until we make it a safe place.
That's right. If people are concerned about their physical safety, that is primary. And you're right, these other things, while they're so very important, they're secondary to making sure that our personal physical safety is assured. You're exactly right. And of course, that's a big part of the reason why businesses often don't come to Louisiana, because they're afraid of the crime issue also. Jay, where does, we talk about accountability when it comes to crime. Obviously, that's very, very important that criminals or would-be criminals know that there is real accountability for criminal acts. But where, in your view, does rehabilitation come into this process? We live in a system whereby many criminals really are in and out of the system. The recidivism rate in Louisiana is higher than in many other states in the country. What can be done to ensure that there is some real effort to rehabilitate and reform people so that they're not simply rotating doors coming in and out of the system?
Well, that is one of the most difficult thing in crime and corrections is their rehabilitation aspect and the ability of government to discern who is capable of being rehabilitated. And look, you can put a whole bunch of experts in a room and psychiatrists and psychologists and counselors and crime experts and with respect to one individual, it's very difficult for them to determine whether that person is going to commit crime again once he leaves. And some criminals are good con men. They know what to tell the counselor and the psychologist or the psychiatrist or the evaluators, and get out and do the same thing again. But uh, the thing is, once somebody's established a pattern of being unable to rehabilitate, then you know we got to be tougher on those people and not let them just go through it over and over. I said this I was responding to a left winger on Twitter the other day who wanted to argue about some of these things, and I'm like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And so we do need to provide the opportunity for rehabilitation and training for those in prison. But if they choose not to partake of that opportunity, and I'm not one of these, first time offense, unless it's obviously a very serious crime like a murder or armed robbery or something like that. But I'm not to lock them in jail, throw away the key on their first offense. But if people are repeating this after opportunity to get some training and learn how to learn some sort of skill for a job. I mean, there are lots of jobs in this state that are unfilled, and employers will tell you that people are still searching for jobs, but people have to have a prospective candidate that is not inclined to violence, that can pass a drug test, and that has a willingness to work, even if they don't have the skills yet. There are lower level jobs that pay well over minimum wage if somebody's willing to show up and do it, and employers will train people.
They will, and one of the issues, Jay, that we've discussed with other guests on the show, shifting gears slightly here, is diverting some of the public funds that are going to traditional college education routes, diverting those funds, even on the high school level, to training and funding in skilled trades, so that high school students, and many of them, increasing numbers, are opting out of their traditional four-year college route. And I know our superintendent, Cade Brumley, and others are focused on diverting some funds and resources to training, even on the high school level, these young men and women in skilled trades, so that we can fill some of these blue collar positions that are desperately needed in our state. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that is something that has already started, and I know Cade is working with our community and technical college system. They are offering community and technical college classes to high school students in a lot of areas, and that needs to continue. You know, again, and look, I don't want to sound like a negative Nelly. Like they say, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. And I've said it a couple of times already. One of the leaders, now retired from our local community and technical college, said, we have a problem getting a lot of young people to want to go into fields where there's a lot of demand for jobs. A lot of the technical fields, he says, and it's because they're a little harder. So that there are a lot of kids that want to come in and just take a few remedial courses and, some, and then maybe, and a lot of those now obviously can be transferred to a four-year university if they choose, which is fine. That's okay to start out at the community college and transfer if that's what you want. But getting people a lot of young people to want to commit to something that's hard. I mean, my predecessor of many years ago, Bob Kostelka, wanted welders because welders were in demand, and they still are.
Big demand, big time demand.
But a kid goes into welding class, it is physically extremely demanding. And a couple of days in class, a lot of them say, no, that's too hard. So we have kind of a cultural issue, of getting people to go into lines of work that will pay well, but you have to really earn that pay. It's you don't walk in with and become the manager. And there are kids who are doing that and are very successful. And there are lots of success stories, but there's still a lot of demand, and there are a lot of young people who could head that direction if they so chose, and they're not always choosing the right way to go, and that ties into other cultural issues that we have with the issue with drugs and alcohol abuse by young people and older people as well, but and in families, single parent families, dysfunctional families, the dad or the mom's not there and the dad is a user or vice versa, and these kids, some will find a way on their own, but some won't, and sadly, and so those cultural issues are standing in our way, and that affects the high school dropout rate. That affects their determination to succeed in high school or community college or trade schools. There are lots of opportunities for these people, these kids, and there's some success stories, but the negative statistics show that there's a lot more that needs to be done, and how to address some of those underlying social issues are very difficult.
They are very 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 difficult. Yeah, very difficult to navigate. It, but you hit the nail on the head, Jay. I'm sorry. It comes so much down to the cultural issues, the values that we're inculcating in our students. As you well know, 50, 60, 70 years ago, even more recently than that, there really wasn't an issue about being able to fill these skilled labor jobs because people were not afraid or not averse to hard work. And they understood that you don't start off at the top. You start off at the bottom and you work hard and you build your way up. But it seems like in our culture now, particularly among many of our young people, certainly not all, there is this sense of sort of immediate gratification and immediate reward rather than understanding that to be successful requires a sustained effort, and much of that does come down to the cultural issues and values that our kids are seeing out there.
Right, and look, I don't want to denigrate the entire system because there are a lot of good people.
There are
working very hard to make the system better, and there are a lot of success stories out there. I mean, I did a tour of the graphic packaging converting plant out there, and there's young people that have great jobs out there who did not go to college, but they did get some sort of post high school training, and they show up for work. They pass the drug test. They're willing to work hard, and they make really good money. And I'm really proud that we have that facility in our area. Their sister plant makes the paper, and then they convert it into the 12 packs of Coca-Cola or beer or whatever for all the major manufacturers of beverages around the world, and they ship all over the world. I think they're either the first or the largest or the second largest, and those opportunities exist across the state in various industries, but you got to have someone willing to do the work and get the training, pass the drug test.
That's important. Pretty basic.
Yeah.
And show up to work on time.
Yeah. And show up to work on time. One of the Charlie Kirk, who's you may be familiar with, who's the head of Turning Point USA, has said that among the most conservative demographic in the country now are young men between the ages of 18 and 30. because of what they've seen and what they've observed in the country and the extreme position that our current presidential administration has taken, and just a lot of things they see in the culture. And they're hardworking, and they understand the importance of building success over time. So I agree with you. There's a lot to be. Certainly, you cannot paint with too broad a brush here. And there's a lot to be hopeful about in terms of the up and coming generation being able to fill good, skilled labor positions, because, as you said earlier, we desperately need them.
Yeah, and I think things are changing, like you said.
I'm hopeful they are. I mean, in my own business, we have right at about 110, 115 employees. We find employees, and ours is office work, clerical, paralegal, mortgage, title related, lending related, et cetera. And it requires some skills, computer skills, et cetera, which most kids learn how to keyboard now. But the most important thing for us is somebody that wants to do a good job and is eager to learn and do it, and is smart enough to understand what we do. And sometimes the person with the most certificates and the most education isn't always the best employee. So we're not real particular about credentials. Now this is specific to my little business, but I've got one example. Young lady started out, did not have any college education, and she started out as like an errand runner. Basically, that was back when we actually paid people minimum wage. We don't have any minimum wage employees anymore, and she was just eager to learn. And we like this little girl running errands, and she probably 18, 19 years old. Now she is our uh, quality assurance manager, and she makes high five figures, and has got married, has three children, and has a great life, and is a great worker. And we do whatever we can to keep her happy. That's just one small example. And coming in, you'd think, oh, she's not ambitious. She didn't go to college. She didn't go to community or technical college. It wasn't like she was a high school kid with a part-time job. This was going to be her job, and she worked her way up. We love success stories like that, and we have a lot of employees that have had longevity with us. But some come with a lot of credentials and then don't pan out.
Yeah.
So you just never know. It's all about what's the person. The ideals and the values they hold.
And what you just described, Jay, really, what you just described so well, really is historically the American dream, the achievement of the American dream, which, as evidenced by what you just told us about that young lady, is still possible in the United States and in Louisiana, not only for her, but for many, many others who are willing to work hard and be disciplined, show up for work. And as you said, of course, pass the all-important drug test, right?
Well, this reminds me of a conversation I had yesterday with a friend. She is a single mom. She has 3 jobs. She's a paralegal. She has a real estate license, does a real estate business, and she's a coach at a gym. And she's telling me that she is struggling to make ends meet doing these 3 jobs because of her taxes. Is that something we've heard some rumors that people, the legislatures, several people have mentioned to us that have come on the show, there's an interest in getting rid of the state income tax and maybe taking a look at some of the other taxes. I know franchise has been on the chopping block before, and we haven't really been able to get rid of that. Are those some of the things that you're thinking about taking a look at during the regular session?
Well, we can't take up that during the regular session because it's not a fiscal session this year. Every other year is a general session. Every other year is a fiscal session in which taxes can be brought up. And yeah, there are a lot of people that want to do away with the income tax. I'm all for that, but the devil's in the details. You got to get the money from somewhere. So Texas is all often thrown about as is a great system to replicate, which would be very difficult in our state to make that change. But the bottom line is the overall tax burden in Texas is a little bit higher than Louisiana when you add it all up and divide it per capita. They just get their money elsewhere, primarily property taxes. So,
What if, what effect, Jay, do you think, assuming it could be done in a way that does not deplete state resources that are needed for critical infrastructure and the like, what do you think the effect economically would be in Louisiana if the income tax were in fact abolished here?
it's not a panacea. It would be attractive to, because the income tax here is not real high. I mean, it's not like we're California at 15%. It's what, 4.25, and that's the top rate for personal income tax. And the number one thing for businesses to relocate here is workforce, an adequate workforce to draw from that has the skills and has the people. The second thing is education, and that's a multifaceted. One is education for workers so they can do the job that needs to be done, that they have adequate, basic skills getting out of high school, and that we have educational facilities to train workers, and a lot of that's being done. The community and technical colleges are working with a lot of the employers to develop curriculums to benefit them. But another issue is for employees and executives to have public schools they can send their kids to, and that is a real stumbling block in some areas. The public education is not good, and the higher level executives love the income tax not being here. And we want to attract the high level executives as well, but the middle class type uh, employee wants a free public school, or they're going to pay for it through taxes, obviously, but they don't want to have to pay for private or parochial schools. And that's what a lot of people, when they look at moving here, are looking, well, I'm going to have to pay for private schools if I move there. Among some people, depends on where they live. So taxes play a part of it. Um, our taxes are not outrageously high here. And if we get rid of the income tax, and people are talking about Mississippi got rid of the income tax. Well, Mississippi did not get rid of the income tax. They're trying to. And if you do it, you have to do it in a measured way so that you don't create an economic disaster.
Yeah, yeah, that is important. That is important. But in principle, working on that issue and doing something along those lines, I think, would be attractive to business. But Jay, you're so right about how all these things are interrelated. The public education system, making sure that the kids of these business owners who corporations who want to come here are in a public school where they're learning that's adequate and where they're safe, most importantly also. And as you said, whether they can come in and make sure that they've got a capable workforce to draw on. There's nothing worse than settling a business in a state, going in there and starting up and realizing you don't have anybody who can come in here and do the work for you, And then, of course, the crime issue. So much of this is so interrelated when it comes to not only individuals coming to the state, but businesses coming to the state.
Right. And we have some businesses that have come in. I mean, we can do more. And Jeff is, no one will be more energetic than Jeff Landry in getting on the phone and calling executives and saying, we want to help you. Tell us what you need and we'll work on it. And most companies, if you have a really high tax state like California or New York and New Jersey or Illinois, that's going to scare them off. But most large companies are not too, their lobbyists will try to lobby, their representatives will always try to have to pay less. But at the end of the day, most of them don't mind paying some taxes. Even in Texas, which is always talked about, that they have a very limited industrial tax exemption. And one of their rules over there in Texas is you don't get out of property taxes, no matter who you are, if the tax is to support schools. Of course, they support their schools primarily by property taxes. They do use some state revenue for that, but it's primarily local property taxes. So here, if you get a company gets the industrial tax exemption contract, they don't pay any property taxes for 5 to 10 years, and then they usually re-up and try to get another exemption for any expansion or rework or remodeling of their plant and equipment. So taxes are important. I think to replicate Florida or something like Florida or like Texas or Nevada would be a positive thing. But there are other states that still have an income tax that have done quite well. Virginia, North Carolina.
Yeah, and maybe because they have their crime under control, and maybe because they have a system whereby they know they're going to have the workforce that they need, people coming in skilled to be able to. So it is important, Jay. That's a very important point you make, that taxes are an issue, an important issue, but they are certainly not the only issue. Yeah. I want to ask you about some legislation that you brought a couple of years ago, a big concern of our listeners, and a very broad frustration that many Louisiana citizens have, Jay, and I'm sure Americans across the country have, is this idea that their speech on social media is just being crushed. And I know that there is successful federal litigation in place, headed up by our own Attorney General, whereby the Fifth Circuit has exposed this collusion between the government and big tech to suppress conservative speech. But you brought some legislation here a couple of years ago that would have allowed a civil action by the Attorney General in Louisiana, and also, if I'm not mistaken, a private action by citizens, if it could be proven that their core constitutionally protected speech had been suppressed or crushed on big tech platforms. What are your thoughts on that? I know that passed very successfully out of the Senate when you brought it, ended up dying in a Commerce Committee in the House for lack of a quorum. Are you interested in re-urging that legislation? I guarantee you that's something a lot of our listeners would be interested in hearing about.
I am, and that bill was, in its simplest form, said that these platforms cannot suppress or cannot edit political and religious speech. And, my concern is, and it remains my concern, is that is the way by which more and more all of our information is coming through these social media platforms and the like. And so we have a handful of really big companies that are curating the information we get to see and hear, and they are influencing the public by leaving things out or putting things in. They own the public square basically, and it's becoming more so every day. And that's the reason I brought the bill. Now, since then, Twitter, for example, has changed hands, and Elon Musk is allowing a lot more speech uh, from a particular area. More conservatives are being, and there's misinformation as well. Don't get me wrong. There's misinformation on all platforms, and things that are wrong, and things taken out of context. But you have to let it go to wait, as we say in the legal profession. Let the public discern for themselves. But just out and out banning things that turned out to be correct in hindsight, we found out that a lot of things
Yes, yes, indeed. You're reading my mind there, Jay. So much that turned out to be correct, wasn't it?
Exactly. And so let the information get out there. Yes, we don't want mob rule. And if a company is forced to allow a variety of opinion and with respect to political and religious matters, then if they want to add reader content like some of them do, or offer their, if they have a contrary opinion or if they think it's misinformation, let them, it's a free country, let them label it that that's their opinion on it, but don't prohibit all of us from seeing it.
Yes.
And
And
look,
your legislation, Jay, specifically excluded speech that is profane or obscene or obviously indecent, and simply would have protected political speech. You know.
my bill was not as broad as the protections afforded by the Constitution. But the argument that the opponents of the bill would make was that, hey, it's a private company. The First Amendment applies to the government, right? Which is true in the general sense. However, my bill wasn't applying the First Amendment to these corporations. It was demanding that their political and religious beliefs not be censored, but there was a history of forcing the media to allow both sides, to people to hear both sides of the story, and that rule was upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court in a 1969 or 70 case. It was a fairness rule, which basically said if you had a political opinion on one side, you had to have a political opinion on the other side as well. And that rule was upheld and held constitutional. But with the advent of cable and a whole bunch of other media sources, the fairness rule was abrogated, but it's still constitutional. And that was my counter to those who suggested that it was unconstitutional to tell these private companies what they could and could not do. And I want that applicable to to all the social media companies, including Twitter. I admire Elon Musk very much and appreciate that he has embraced certain conservative ideals. However, I don't want him curating what our opinions are or what information gets out either. His primary business is Tesla, of course, and Tesla is really only growing significantly in China. Well, China, as we know, is operated by Xi Jinping and the Communist Chinese Party, and they can take away your property at the drop of a hat. So they have a big 8 ball they can drop right on top of Elon's head at any time and destroy his Chinese business interests. And so he's going to be a little bit compromised by allowing some material to get through on his platform. So I don't want him, because he's compromised, to prohibit those that are critical of the CCP to be censored. Now, so far they're not. If you watch Kyle Bass, he says plenty of nasty things about China, as does a whole bunch of other people, and very correctly so, in my opinion, and very factually substantiated. But I think this concern of a small group of Silicon Valley companies controlling what we see and hear is dangerous.
Especially, Jay, when they have federal 230 protections, when they are projecting themselves as mere platforms for the free exchange of ideas, but really, in many instances, are publishers making specific content determinations about what can be heard and what can't. And that's a huge problem.
And what was really scary, that was illuminated by the Missouri Supreme Court case that's actually being litigated in front of our own Judge Terry Doty, revealed startlingly the level in which the federal government has been editing and censoring social media and directing what should be on social media and all that. And Judge Doty, in his opinion, exposed it all. He's got a 100-page opinion. It's a really long thing, but the facts are there. It's shocking and disappointing, and that his decision was so remarkably well written and substantiated by the facts and the law that I don't see how the Fifth Circuit can do anything but affirm that, and the U.S. Supreme Court as well if they're called upon to rule on it. But they were using the social media platforms to advance their issues and to suppress contravening issues, and the government was involved, and so that does make it clearly a First Amendment issue because there was state action.
No question, and not only state action, but state coercion, which led to collusion between the government and big tech, including threats of taking away their immunity protections if they didn't do what they wanted them to do. That I would argue, Jay, as Liz Muriel has, and I think Speaker Mike Johnson has, that is. That perhaps is the most important exposure of government suppression of speech in this country, really since the Alien and Sedition Acts. I can't think of anything more important that was brought out. And of course, our own former Attorney General Jeff Landry, Liz Muriel, and the Attorney General from Missouri were at the spearhead of that. But that is I would recommend that everybody take the time to read that opinion. If you don't think that the federal government has the power to come in and really suppress your speech and your right to be heard, read that opinion. I couldn't agree with you more.
And look, I've got to give a shout out to Judge Doty, who I'm proud to say I went to elementary school with, and high school with, and law school with. He was 1 year behind me in school, and of course, I know Terry and his family, and I couldn't be more proud of the job that he did on that case, and then a whole lot of others.
It will go down in history, Jay, as case of just profound historical importance in preserving what James Madison said was the most important clause of the entire Constitution, the free speech clause of the First Amendment. And that case went a long way in protecting it and salvaging it.
I agree, and I hope it's established throughout the nation that is the current state of the law, and future presidents, regardless of party, can't be censoring what we hear and see.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And I think, to your point, people are more awake and engaged than ever. And I'm convinced that the outcomes we saw in Louisiana in this past election cycle is a result because of that, with strong conservatives leading the pack. And as we talk to people, our listeners and neighbors and others, people's expectations for this legislature are very high. How do we ensure success in this next legislative session, and what does success look like?
That's a big, broad question, but I'm encouraged. I will say that the Senate is definitely more conservative than it was. We have a solid supermajority, and we've got incoming senators Blake Miguez, of course, and Alan Seaball. I've met and spoken with a few times Adam Bass from Shreveport. I'm encouraged by his participation. Valerie Hodges, who I served with in the House, and is very passionate about a lot of these things, especially education and not letting the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, which has nothing to do with any of those three concepts, but is really a grab for political power. She's very attuned into those issues, so I'm encouraged, and I'm hopeful we get, at a minimum, a number of crime bills passed that will essentially tie the hands of bad judges and encourage the good judges to do the right thing, that we will have congressional districts that pass muster, that we will address crime in a whole bunch of ways in the judiciary, that we will start to eliminate some waste. I feel like I'm hopeful that Jeff and his team will be able to root out what's important, so we spend money on what's really going to help the state, as opposed to just helping, special interest or cronies, or protecting jobs, government jobs for people and things of that nature. It's a tall order, but yeah, we're not going to run out of things to work on, and
You got your work cut out for you.
Yeah. Well, transparency, Jay, transparency and accountability, Jay, on the part of our public officials are what Louisiana citizens are looking for. Want to be served in a way that is faithful and represents their interests. Boy, we have a lot of work to do, but it can be done.
it can be. It can be. I'll throw this out there, and I'll probably get myself in trouble a little bit. But one of the things, and I hate to pick on them because there are a lot of good people there, but let's just take example of one agency, Department of Transportation and Development. There are, I think, something like 4,260 employees there. You know how many are unclassified? That means not subject to the rules of civil service. 22. So all the rest of them have these immense civil service protections that make it very difficult to clean out the dead wood. And that's one agency that I think could be revamped, and the money saved could be used toward paying the contractors who actually build the stuff. Because we do have infrastructure, we do have serious infrastructure needs in the state, and that's one of our
Well,
primary
there's a lot of Jay.
obligations.
There's a lot of dead wood. There's no question about that. I've often said that if most private businesses were run as efficiently as many of our state and federal agencies, they would be out of business within 2 months. Because it is extraordinarily wasteful, squanderous of our money, and I love your expression, dead wood. And there's an awful lot of it, and I'm glad to hear you're recognizing that.
Well, oh yeah, I filed a civil service reform bill when I was in the House, and you wouldn't believe the people that came out of the woodwork to oppose it. And it had no chance of success, and I didn't even bring it to a voting committee, as I recall. I don't know, it's been a few years, but you have to have the power of a governor behind something difficult. You can pass fluff bills that don't do a lot all day long. We pass 1,000 bills a year, but to do something that really makes significant, deep, relevant change takes a lot, because you upset the status quo. And I feel like Jeff Landry is going to be the kind of governor that's going to be that kind of leader. I have not heard this from Jeff directly, but some of his people. He says he has told others that I've heard from that he's going to do the right thing, and if it makes him unpopular in some circles, so be it. Even if he's a one-term governor, because he's going to make changes, and that's what I'm encouraged by. So things like civil service reform, things like criminal justice reform that's meaningful and reduces crime and recidivism. Those are going to be hard things, because there are going to be a lot of people arrayed against a lot of the things that we're going to want to do. And we're going to have to, and we haven't mentioned this yet, but a lot of the things that we want to do are going to be difficult, in part because they're going to require 2/3 vote. We can't pass a bill to give the governor the power to fire an attorney, fire a district attorney, without a constitutional amendment. We can't reform civil service fully. We can dance around the edges and do some things without a constitutional amendment.
It takes 2/3 vote to get it to the people, but I'll tell you now, Jay, there are a number of issues that if you could get it passed by 2/3 of both chambers and to the people on a statewide ballot, I guarantee you that much of that would pass, and it probably wouldn't even be that close.
I agree completely, Chris. The trick is getting it out there and getting it through. And if it's a really conservative agenda item, you have to get every Republican in their seat, both House and Senate, because some of these things it's going to be hard to get Democratic buy-in. You might a little bit, and governor has ways of being very persuasive sometimes, but we'll just have to see where it goes. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do a lot of things that we have not been able to do the last 8
Yep,
years.
and it seems like we have the manpower in place. We have the personnel in place in the legislature to do it. We have a good governor, and we are extraordinarily hopeful that we're going to be getting it done. LeCag will be actively involved in it and helping to push a lot of these things forward. Last thing I wanted to mention to you today, Jay, because I think it's worth mentioning before we let you go, is how critically important you were in the 2023 session. I mentioned this at the outset of the show, but how critical you were in ensuring that Gabe Ferment's bill prohibiting what we call the genital mutilation, transgender, so-called genital mutilation of minors in our state is prohibited in Louisiana. You carried it on the Senate side. You spoke very passionately on it, and were extraordinarily instrumental in getting that passed and overridden after the governor vetoed it. So hats off to you for that. What a great exercise of public service on your part. Wanted to thank you on behalf of the State of Freedom and our audience for your heroic work on that issue.
Well, that's awfully nice of you to do that. I gotta give credit where it's due, and Gabe Ferment did the heavy lifting, and he educated himself so well that he he knew what the other side's argument was going to be before they even spat it out. It was an ideologically driven phenomena. This giving kids these ginger changing drugs, these hormones, and the god awful surgeries, and there are going to be people that do odd things, and people that are very conflicted in their mental state of being and whatnot. But allowing minors to engage in things, or sometimes at their parents' behest. And believe it or not, in some circles, I've learned that it's kind of like a badge of honor to have a kid that wants to
That's
change
trendy.
sexes. It's not real common here, but the thing is, these are minors, and these procedures are irreversible and can cause serious damage to their physical development and growth, not to mention their mental development and growth. And I was happy to be a small part of uh, getting that bill across the finish line.
And but for your efforts and the efforts of Gabe Ferment and a number of others, Louisiana would right now be sitting in the dubious position of being a sanctuary state for this type of lunacy. Fortunately, we are not. Thank you for your efforts. And thank you for taking the time, Senator Morris, for coming on the show today and talking about some of these issues. It's been a very, very rewarding discussion. Looking forward to a great, great session upcoming. And thank you for your continued leadership in our state.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure. It flew by. I'm sure we could talk a couple hours longer, but you know, that's the way we politicians do. We can go on
Well,
for a good while.
but you're distinguished from a number of them because you actually say things that actually are meaningful and substantive.
Well, that's awfully nice.
God bless you, sir.
That.
Yeah.
I better hang up, but before we get too truthful here. So.
God bless you, sir. Thank you for coming on.
Before we let you go, sorry, Chris, before we let you go, how can people follow you on social media, follow the work that you're doing, and how can they get in touch with you with any legislation ideas, concerns, questions?
Sure. Well, obviously, anybody that wants to can Google us and get our phone number here at the office. But oh, here it is. I got it right here. It's 318-362-4270 is our office phone. You can email at morrisjc@legis.la.gov. That's on the Senate website. You can get that email address, morrisjc@le gis.la.gov. And then I'm on Twitter as at JJMorris3. I tried to get at J Morris when I got a Twitter account years ago, but that was already taken. So at JJMorris3. And I tweet pretty regularly and pretty randomly on a variety of subjects. So feel free to follow me there and direct message me on Facebook. I have 2 different accounts, and I try to respond to most everybody that contacts me.
Well, on behalf of the State of Freedom and on behalf of LeCag, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to working with you in the future, and we will have you back on at some point during the session.
Awesome. My pleasure.
Have a great day.
See you guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, Chris, I feel like we've got a lot to look forward to. I feel like there's so much coming up. It sounds like it's just kind of hard to wrap your arms around everything that is in the ambition to get done. So Senator Morris gave us a good roadmap for what we can expect in the week ahead, which sounds like a lot of ceremony. And then it sounds like after that, they'll be getting down to the business of putting committees together, naming committee chairs, and really then moving into the people's business.
Getting down to the hard work, and we will be right there front and center, encouraging good legislation that is representative of the interest of Louisiana citizens. And that's really what it comes down to, Danielle. It's been a pleasure to be with you today. I want to thank the State of Freedom supporters and listeners for always being here with us as we broaden across the state. The support is indispensable to allowing us to continue to grow and expand.
Yes, and if people would like to support us, you can do that by going to freedomstate.us or sending a check to P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana, B-O-U-R-G, Louisiana 70343. And you can support our work this upcoming legislative session, which is basically now, by going to lecag.org or sending a check to a P.O. Box. I never remember it.
P.O. Box 64952, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70896. Your donations, your resources help us to continue to build our infrastructure so that we can keep a very close and direct eye on these legislators, on the legislation and the issues that they are pushing, to make sure that good legislation is advanced and bad legislation is defeated. We are your eyes and ears in the legislature, and your resources that you provide us and your donations help us to do that. So please continue to donate and support LeCag.
Yes, and not just your eyes and ears, and it's sometimes your voice as well. Your voice is, your voice is heard over your email and your phone, but we know not everybody can make it to Baton Rouge. So when that's the case,
yes. Eyes, ears, and voice very loudly proclaiming the truth.
Indeed. And before we leave, I'll just like to leave you with an opportunity for anyone who may be interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, which is actual dealer cost. Metal Stacks is beating the big sites, and they have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you are just interested in purchasing metals, you can visit metalstacks.com/dwalker and just get to shopping. It helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. So if you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us, and you, Chris, Katie, we'll be happy to get you started with that.
A tremendous opportunity in every way. Metal Stacks. Once you do Metal Stacks, you will not go back. Danielle, thank you for the opportunity today. God bless you as we continue each and every day to advance the state of freedom in Louisiana.
Thanks, Chris. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.